Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Tonight, I'm bringing you something pretty special, a true story that is also a book exclusive that I've never narrated until now. A true story, and I know this because it happened to me. So sit back, relax, and get ready for one terrifying bit of honesty. The time that drugs almost killed me. Drugs are a funny thing, an addictive thing, a terrifying thing. There are very few things that can drive a human being to steal, bargain, compromise, beg, or even kill more effectively than a drug. The dependency a person has on a particular substance can be as real as it is terrifying. Once the clawed grip of drug addiction has seized you, it's difficult to find release. But when most people hear of drug dependence, they think cocaine, heroin, meth, and various other street drugs. But there is another threat, a darker menace that lurks beyond the veil of what many perceive as danger. An aspect of drug dependence that most don't consider: prescription drugs. When I had just graduated with my 4-year bachelor's degree, my first of 3 college degrees, our family suffered what was nearly a tragedy. My wife, Clara, has been battling mental illness most of her life. What specific disease ails her, I cannot say, as her diagnosis has changed several times over the years, in accordance with a change in mental health professionals. This infrequent change in doctors and hospitals with each and every relocation of our young life also coincided with a change in medications. Now, it is said that an individual may take weeks to adjust to a new medication, and that with these also comes some possible gnarly side effects. The list of these side effects with each and every medication is long. Most are rare. However, when changing or stopping a medication, said professionals will wean patients from certain drugs, as the immediate cessation of taking them can result in body shock and a plethora of other negative effects as well. Something I should have paid greater attention to. It all started when I returned home from work one day. Walking in through the front door, I found my wife asleep on the living room couch. This is not unusual for her, as her medication causes fatigue. I set my stuff on the floor, greeted my children, and placed myself in a seat beside her on the couch. After moments of trying, my wife awoke, but not really. Her speech was heavily slurred, as if she were drinking. She had trouble being alert as to what was happening around her, like being asked small questions, and her irritability levels were through the roof. It seemed that no matter what I or my children said, Clara became more and more irate and belligerent. Confused, yet stressed from a day's work, I admit. I exacerbated the situation by getting upset with her behavior myself. And this caused a level of progressively worsening behavior until, finally, knickknacks and small appliances were being thrown through the air for apparently no reason. And whether she grabbed something wrong or had simply been careless. Clara picked up an already broken coffee pot to throw at the wall, but the broken glass had somehow caught her arm, causing her to bleed out in fountains. She not only didn't seem to feel the injury, she immediately began blaming me. But my next course of action was clear. There was so much blood. I thought she'd bleed out at any moment. She looked so pale, all the way to the hospital. By the time we had arrived and gotten her admitted for her terrible wound and manic behavior, Clara was in such a dissociative state that she didn't remember how she had gotten there or why she was there in the first place. But it was too late. She was already in restraints in a hospital bed. She cried, begged me to help her get free. Although every inch of my being wanted desperately to help my beloved, pleading for my assistance, I knew I couldn't. I thought that the best thing for her was to follow doctor recommendations, and as a result, her worst fears had come true. Clara would be admitted to the psychiatric ward for an undetermined amount of time. The oldest children were picked up and staying with family, while my youngest daughter, picked up by her grandparents, would be staying with me in our home upon returning the following day. Alone, sad, confused, and completely drained, I left the hospital without my wife, not knowing what the future might bring. Over the course of the next few weeks, I visited Clara every single day and accepted phone calls from her multiple times a day. Whatever they were doing to her in there had me a little nervous because, as conversations progressed, her condition seemed to only worsen. She would call me claiming to be standing outside at a payphone, mad at me for not coming to get her. Upon calling the hospital, I was informed that she had not been released. When I would see her the following day and ask her about these instances, she claimed to have no memory of them. Her behavior over the phone was always erratic, ranging from a deep hatred for me, for no apparent reason, confusion as to why I had not gone to see her, even though I saw her every single day, to sadness and loneliness at being stuck in a psych ward. Yet, when I would go visit her in person, she would be offstandish, resentful, and downright apathetic at my presence. It was during one of these visits that I noticed something more than peculiar. There were over 50 patients in the ward, behavioral and psychological issues ranging from minor to moderate, with a multitude of disorders across them all. Yet, for some reason, every single person was taking the exact same medication. Now, I have a psych degree, but I feel that one is not needed to realize how strange and unethical this is. Still, bringing this to a professional's attention did absolutely nothing, and the situation would remain unchanged for the duration of her stay. This sent up clear red flags, but I could do nothing about them. 2.5 weeks after she had been admitted, 2.5 weeks of uncertainty in my marriage, depression, and anxiety. The day had arrived when she would finally be released. I was honestly dreading the worst. There had literally been zero improvement in her behavior the whole duration of her stay, and at best, she seemed to mostly despise me. But to my absolute shock, when she came out of the ward and stepped into the vehicle, I was taken aback. She seemed lucid and clear-minded, the way she had always been since before this had all began. In fact, she had gotten information on what had started all of this in the first place. The doctor was supposed to fill her Xanax prescription before he had left to go on vacation for a week. Someone had left the order on his desk, and he either didn't see it or ignored it. Either way, this left my wife without her meds, and due to the sudden stop in Xanax consumption, she suffered a severe psychotic break. We did eventually try to sue the hospital, but to no avail. But at the time, I was just so happy to have my wife back. I hugged her tight in an embrace, and I pulled from the lot. And that's when she asked me about Andrew. Andrew was an inpatient in the ward with her, and over her supervised time there, the pair had become good friends. He had been released a couple of days prior, and she asked if he could come over to our house to hang out. I was apprehensive, yeah, but my children were once again with family, and I was so happy to see her lucid again that I couldn't say no, especially after I tried and she instantly became upset with me. I couldn't take another night of tension between us. I had met Andrew while visiting her a few times, and the guy seemed like a pot-smoking hippie and harmless enough. With a sigh, I agreed, and before heading home, we swung by Andrew's to pick him up. The three of us were back on the road and finally towards my home within an hour. The night progressed not only normally enough, things seemed to be getting better than expected. Clara was totally lucid, affectionate, and more than happy to be home. She had little to no memory of her behavior over the past 2 weeks, and seemed genuinely distraught and compassionate over all that I had suffered. This honestly made me feel kind of guilty. Here I was upset with all that I have endured, and yet what she must have gone through was surely much worse. But really, we were just happy to have one another back in each other's daily lives. Andrew was mostly quiet and reserved. He talked a little with me and my wife, but was basically distant most of the afternoon. This had gone so well, in fact, that around 8 p.m. that evening, Andrew stated that he no longer wanted to spend the night, and asked if we could give him a ride home. My wife and I asked him if he was sure. There was no problem for him to sleep on the couch overnight, but he insisted he'd rather sleep in his own bed. It was a 45-minute drive one direction to get Andrew back to his apartment, but I honestly didn't mind. I wasn't too keen on him being with me and my wife on our first night together again anyway, and I really didn't know him too well, so after a little deliberation, I was more than happy to commute him back to the city. By the time we had gotten home, it was pitch black outside. Stress and fatigue from a long day and an even longer 2 weeks. Clara and I curled up on the couch beside each other to watch a movie together. And that's when there was a loud knock at the door. Confused and a bit shaken by how loud it was, I slowly approached the door. I was shocked to see a uniformed police officer on the other side of the door's small window. Curious, I opened the door and asked him if I could help. He immediately asked to come inside of my house to speak with me and my wife. Having nothing to hide, I gladly let him in. What transpired after he came inside still haunts me to this day, and is something I'll never forget. By the time he had left, I had more than several questions for Clara, all of which she had trouble providing answers to because she remembered none of what the officer said. But after an hour of thinking back upon all that had happened, Clara's sudden reaction to a lack of Xanax, the broad medication everyone in the ward was taking, and my wife's dissociative fugue and memory loss, all coalesced into an answer that chills me to my core. While in the hospital, under her doctor's regimen, and being told by that same doctor over and over that all her problems stemmed from being my fault, combined with the close quarters of everyone taking the same medication, led to a conversation she didn't remember having. A conversation that led the police to knock on my door. Apparently, Andrew had heard of my wife's displeasure with our situation at the time, and offered his assistance at alleviating her of her problems, namely, me. Apparently, a few patients had overheard the pair talking about how once they got out, she would bring Andrew back to our place for a sleepover, and he would stab me to death in my sleep. Because Clara had no memory of this conversation, she and I were simply happy to have each other's company again. But Andrew did remember. He had intentionally come over that evening because he intended on following through with their plan. And this is why he acted so distant and strange at seeing my wife and I getting along, eventually opting to go home instead of murdering me when I was vulnerable. By the time the police had been informed of their conversations in the psych ward, Andrew had already been brought home. The policeman spoke at length with my wife, to which she insisted she had no memory at all of any such conversation. He eventually took her word, but instructed me to hide all knives and sharp objects outside of the house before leaving. I know my wife, and I knew without her having to reassure me that she had no memory of these conversations and events, and I believed her. But what really scares me is, what if Andrew had decided to spend the night anyway? What if he simply decided to kill us both? What if my wife was still under the influence of whatever the hell they were giving her in there? Well, I wouldn't be here writing this story now, that's for sure. We never heard from Andrew again, nor do we know what happened to him, and I'd like to keep it that way. As for us, I hold no resentment towards my wife. I know in my heart that really wasn't her. It was something else. But I knew then that I had narrowly avoided a dark fate. Because there is no doubt about it, whatever she was taking in that damn place, that drug almost killed me. Well, I'd like to go ahead and end this video on a little bit of a more serious note. Mental health is no laughing matter, and if you or someone you know is in need of some mental health support, please get help. Reach out. Support is out there. But if you want something a little bit more fictionally terrifying, make sure to stop by again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday. Social media can be very unpredictable, especially regarding horror content. If this content gets removed, all new content will be simultaneously presented on various websites provided in the description to this video. Make sure to follow me in other digital spaces so that you never miss out on the terror. Also, If you like this video, make sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. It helps the channel a lot. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy what's here, consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Writing is a dream of mine, and it's all of you that make that dream come true.